A recent DHS intelligence report received by the Border Patrol is instructing agents to be on the lookout for Venezuelan inmates who've been released from prison and who are now trying to enter the U.S. This is according to a source within the Customs and Border Protection. The report indicates the Venezuelan government is purposely freeing inmates, including some inmates convicted of murder, rape, and extortion. Okay, so DHS has information that Venezuela is purposely releasing hardened criminals and intentionally sending them to the US border? What happens when they get here? I mean, with all of the illegal border crossings, there's little doubt that some, if not many, of these criminals are going to end up inside the US, if they're not already here. I mean, it's not like we have a secure border. Only a moron would think that the southern border is secure.
The border is secure.
This is JP with Political Pop Culture, and this is my take. On Sunday, Breitbart obtained a report from the Border Patrol indicating that the government of Venezuela is releasing prisoners intentionally and sending them to the US border. Now, we're not just talking about people accused or convicted of petty crimes here either. Among those released are people who've been convicted of things like rape, extortion, and even murder. The intelligence report warns agents that the freed prisoners have been seen within the migrant caravans traveling through Mexico and towards the US border as recently as July. The source, who's not authorized to speak with the media, said the move is reminiscent of a similar action taken by Cuban dictator Fidel Castro during the Mariel boat lift in the 1980s. Okay, for those of you not old enough to remember, the Mariel boat lift happened in 1980, and this was when Cuban dictator Fidel Castro allowed more than 125,000 Cubans to leave Cuba on boats to head for the United States. Unfortunately, it turned out that a large number of the Cuban exiles were actually convicts released from Cuban prisons and mental health facilities. The resulting fiasco became a pretty major problem for Jimmy Carter's floundering administration, as well as the Floridians who were stuck cleaning up the mess, which resulted from such a large influx of not only criminals, but in some cases criminally insane people. Now, here's a question. If we can prove that the Venezuelan government is behind this, if we can prove that the government of Venezuela is intentionally and purposefully releasing prisoners and directing them to make their way to the US border, if we can prove that, wouldn't that be considered an act of war? I mean, these may not be enemy soldiers in the traditional sense, but they sure as hell could be considered enemy combatants, especially if their intention is to spread discord once they get into the United States. I mean, what do you think they're going to do when they get here? Push around carts selling tequeños to tourists in Ghirardelli Square? Now that I mention it, actually, tequeños sound pretty good. You know what else sounds pretty good? Clicking on the like button and then hitting the subscribe button and clicking on the notification bell. You see, that way you're going to be the first to know every time we drop new content just like this. You'll also be helping out the channel by telling the algorithm to show this video to other people who might be interested. Every little bit really does help, so thank you. The report does not specify that the release of the convicts could be a purposeful geopolitical move specifically intended to impact U.S. national security. Another information gap cited in the report acknowledges the unknown role that the Bolivarian National Intelligence Service, which is Venezuela's equivalent to the CIA, may have played in the deliberate releases. The source says that the task of identifying Venezuelans who have criminal records in their home country is nearly impossible. Of the thousands of Venezuelan migrants surrendering along the US-Mexico border daily, most, according to the source, are being released into the United States. Without effective diplomatic relations with Venezuela, the source says that access to criminal databases in that country simply don't exist. Unless we apprehend someone who voluntarily tells us they've committed a violent crime in Venezuela, we can only guess, and that doesn't work well, the source said. They will more than likely be released. The source also says it's unknown how many have already been released into the interior of the United States to pursue asylum. Okay, wouldn't the most prudent solution here, in the interest of national security, be to halt all Venezuelan migrants from entering the U.S. until such time as their true identities and histories can be confirmed? And come to think of it, why are we accepting asylum seekers from Venezuela at all? I mean, in order for migrants to make it to the U.S. border, they have to travel through Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. You're telling me not one of these other countries is willing to accept these migrants and asylum seekers? I am all for bringing your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, but we have borders in place for a reason. We have immigration laws for a reason. We do not have the infrastructure or the taxpayer dollars to support every single poor person in Central and South America. According to Customs and Border Protection, between October of 2021 and July of 2022, more than 130,000 Venezuelan migrants have been encountered after entering the United States illegally. In all of fiscal year 2020, less than 5,000 were apprehended. This represents an increase of nearly 3,000%. In one Texas-based Border Patrol sector, single groups of hundreds of mostly Venezuelan migrants enter the United States daily. Well, clearly something has changed, and it's not just that the pandemic was going on in 2020. You do not see a 3,000% increase in the number of illegal aliens from one country streaming into the United States unless something significant has changed. The Biden administration's handling of the border crisis and the fact that over 4.9 million illegals have come across the border since Joe Biden took office tells you that a large part of that problem is right here at home. The report does not specify the location or destination of the released convicts. Frustrated by the increased number of migrant crossings across the southwest border, Republican governors from Texas and Florida began transporting migrants, mostly Venezuelans, to Washington, D.C., New York City, and Chicago. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis chartered flights for 50 mostly Venezuelan migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. Those migrants were quickly shuttled from the wealthy island city by National Guard soldiers to nearby Joint Base Cape Cod. Now, obviously, I've covered the Republican governors sending illegals to liberal sanctuary cities and states in detail over the past couple weeks. But it doesn't look like this is a story that's going to be going away anytime soon. The bottom line here is that this is not just incompetence on the part of the Biden administration. Look, nobody is that incompetent and nobody is that stupid politically. At this point, we have to infer that the lack of action by the Biden administration at the southern border is because they intend for these illegals to come across and into our country. I mean, really, what other excuse do they have for not securing the border?
The border is secure.
If the Venezuelan government is deliberately sending convicts into the U.S. through Biden's open border, and if those criminal illegals end up hurting U.S. citizens, which I pray they do not, I can only hope that every inaction by the Biden administration and everyone involved with their deliberate inactions is held accountable. They won't be, of course. The politicians who create the policies that hurt Americans always somehow find themselves exempt. And you and I, we always end up paying the price. I hope that the heroic actions of Governors Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis continue to shine a light on the disgusting hypocrisy of the left. And I hope that soon we are able to take our country back from those who seek to subdue and pervert it.
The border is secure.
That's my take. What's your take? You can let me know your take in the comments below. You can also let me know your take by joining the cult at Pol Pop Cult on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, and Truth Social. Thank you for listening.